Hi, everybody. It's Jessica Stone at Stansberry Research, and I've got Kim Iskyan on the line from Singapore. He's our international editor. And Kim, you've been looking a lot at why global debt matters. Let's talk about that topic because it's obviously a bigger problem than it was going into the last economic crisis. The last time we went into the 2008 economic crisis, I think it's been about 40 percentage points more global debt, according to the International Finance Institute, that we have now. So much higher levels going into the crisis. What are the implications of that as it stands right now?
Well, yeah, Jessica, the volume of debts now is at $322 trillion, and it's up $87 trillion since 2008, 2009. That's like 4 times the annual GDP of the United States. So this is just an astronomical amount of debt.
There was a lot of coordination last time, right? There was a lot of international coordination between East and West, North and South. But this time it seems like people are just on their own.
With the Corona crisis, I think early on, we did see countries, it was every country for itself. We saw that in PPE procurement. We saw that in closing borders. We saw that in vaccination nationalism. And there was just very little coordination across the board. So it's almost not surprising that we see that as a carry-on. I think in the bigger picture, over the past few years, as the United States has increasingly tried to abdicate its role as, the world's kind of go-to superpower by pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords, by just recently talking about not funding the WHO, by downgrading NATO, everything the United States has done to try to pull away from its spot at the head of the geopolitical table. I think now we're seeing that coming home to roost. And there is very little coordination between countries in terms of how they're trying to react to the economic side of this crisis, to say nothing of the medical side.
The G20, I believe, has already agreed to temporarily freeze about $20 billion worth of bilateral loan repayments for 76 poorer countries. And they're asking private creditors to do the same. But the question, obviously, in this equation is who's left holding the bag?
Well, what's happening here, Jessica, is that a lot of the small, developing, not even small, but developing countries, they can't print money because then they'll risk hyperinflation. And they obviously don't have a reserve currency that they can just print at will. So they're forced to make very difficult decisions between buying ventilators and saving the lives of their people or paying debt back. So yeah, the IMF is helping out. The G20 has said, okay, we'll suspend repayment of debt until the end of the year and then we'll talk. But what the G20 doesn't want to have happen is for those countries to turn around and take those saved monies and repay outstanding sovereign bond debt. So that's held by the likes of PIMCO, Fidelity, Aberdeen, name your global investment manager, asset manager, and they're going to be holding some of this. So now the G20 is saying to these guys, well, why didn't you step up and help us out? Help us help them. Now, in the past, a lot of these global asset managers who are not hedge funds, who are kind of a breed apart, but the big asset managers have stepped away and said, hey, we don't want to deal with this, and they just sell it and walk out of the room. It's unclear whether they're going to do that this time or whether they're going to be much more aggressive.
So many of these countries are going to be looking to somebody, right, to lend. And so if it's not these largely American and European entities, who's it going to be?
China has been one of the biggest lenders to developing economies over the past 15 years. And, if you're Mozambique, if you're Zambia, if you're Ecuador, you go where the money is. And if China says, hey, look, we'll lend you money to help you build this dam, build this bridge, build this port, and they can't get that funding elsewhere, they're going to say, fantastic. Now, what happens when they can't repay that debt? I think that's what we're going to be seeing. China is probably a little bit less amenable to saying, hey, don't worry, guys, we'll work out some other time. They may now call in their cards and say, okay, well, that huge piece of infrastructure that we built, who owns it now? We've seen some preview of this actually in Sri Lanka over the past few years, where China built a huge port in the hometown of the former president, no less, in a relatively remote part of the island. And Sri Lanka couldn't pay it back. So China said, oh, okay, well, we could use this.
Can you talk more broadly about how investors should be thinking about both opportunities and challenges in light of what we've been discussing about debt?
I think it makes sense to be a lot more vigilant about what is actually in that basket of emerging market debt. If you want to go for the higher yielding funds, the chances are that they hold paper that's a whole lot more speculative. So yeah, if you want to go for the 8% yield, then prepare to get burned when Zambia blows up on you. On the other hand, if you're okay with a much lower yield, then South Korea, Taiwan, China.
Thanks so much, Kim Iskyan, for joining us. And if you would like to see much more content like this, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.